Hi, this is Damien from AtHope, and I am an Axiological Atheist. And today I'm going to do something a little different. Me and my wife are going to together basically read back and forth my comments and the comments of someone who is an ancient aliens believer. And this is, to me, a really important issue. And sometimes I let it go because I feel like the belief in aliens is not as harmful as, say, the God beliefs, because generally people aren't out killing people for, alien beliefs, and aren't hating, gays, and aren't hating or seeing women as less just because aliens they believe exist. So, but this does really create a problem, because I see this even in the atheist community. There's really a lack of critical thinking about this subject. And so I took the time to actually put something together. So what I want to address is the fact that what was said to me. Now, the claim I'm going to read actually is the one that was almost at the end. I'm reading at the beginning because I think it's pretty much helps you understand the whole conversation through this one statement that the non-critical thinking alien believer said to me. It's a projection of faith. Let me read it in their words. I think the topic of aliens existing is just like religion. Those who believe need no proof, and those who don't believe won't be convinced. You're right. I do not get convinced on faith. So if what you think you have to offer is faith, you're correct. I will never be convinced. And I would say no rational person should be convinced, because faith is not a means of knowing anything, and it could be used to basically justify anything I want to believe. Because if I don't require some position to stand on a solid foundation of evidence, well, then faith could be used to claim anything. In fact, just think, what is there that you could not use faith to justify without evidence? So, do you believe in aliens on faith also? And I often hear people that have such wacky, untrue, uncritical thinking beliefs that tell me I'm closed-minded. So let me read you a little thing about how I'm open. I live an open life. I have an open mind and an open personality. I tried to hide nothing about myself or my life. Both aspects of my openness are just me being me. A political statement to inspire change in others, or to aid in understanding of others. I live such openness and feel strengthened by it. Thus have an open willingness to share my triumphs, as well as open to admit that which could be seen as more shameful, knowing it too can inspire others to think or behave positively. I will openly talk in a way to a stranger or friend alike. I think openly about ideas and am forever openly looking to improve, but open also to loving myself for the effort, even if I am slow to success or fail again and again. I see my life open before me, and thus an event is but one point in my journey, not an end point in itself. I am bound thus. I am also striving at struggles with an open willingness to improve. I am thus open to change. Moreover, just as I openly want to see or be seen as right, I am also open to being wrong, knowing that a mind unwilling to see itself as wrong is not a free thinker, and a mind willing to see itself as wrong is becoming a free thinker. I am open to ask for help, as I am open to help. I am open to being a friend to the world, and tend to act with openness, and thus even friendliness to those being unfriendly to me. I am open to making a difference in the lives of others, just to help them, and am open to do so in an open, thoughtful way. Lastly, I have an open marriage, as well as an open style to how I relate in relationships, romantic and otherwise. I am open. Atheism is reasonable because faith as a method in the acquisition of knowledge is not worth believing in. I am a strong rationalist, and defending reason is a life's calling. When you start thinking you're out atheism, anti-theism, or anti-religionism is not vitally needed, just remember all the millions of children being indoctrinated right now that need our help badly. One so desperately in need of our help with the truth. 3 things are common in all religions: pseudoscience, pseudo-history, and pseudo-morality. And Ancient Aliens takes 2 of these, the pseudoscience and the pseudo-history. And I would say, unfortunately, even if someone's an atheist, they're probably still running off of programming from the religions. That's why they're more prone to accept things like pseudoscience and pseudo-history. If you are a faith believer, may I remind you that faith in the acquisition of knowledge is not a method worth believing in, because what proof is faith of anything that one could claim by faith, as many people can have different faith even at the same idea or same religion? I value good belief etiquette. In other words, reason belief acquisitions, good belief maintenance, and honest belief relinquishment. Now, my wife is going to read the position of the atheist believer, and then I'll get my response. Alien believer.
Okay, alien believer response. This might be a little out there, but here goes. We have several dimensions in this world. In fact, 3 plus. When you find your twin flame, a certain attachment is formed. The universe sent you to each other to achieve a certain task for humanity. You immediately recognize your twin, and the way you communicate is through your higher self in the 5th dimension. Damien, I seem to recall in one of his posts you say something about that the term spiritual. What I mean by spiritual is we are connected to one another in a Wi-Fi sort of way, mind to mind.
My response: I don't see value in spiritual. To me, it's like soul. Thoughts on spirituality? Well, the English word spirit comes from the Latin. And what it means, spirit, soul, courage, vigor, ultimately from a source of Proto-Indo-European. It is distinguished from the Latin soul sometimes, but nonetheless is derived from the Indo-European root to breathe, the earliest form. And also, the other words relate to it are also breathe, moldable air, spirit, psyche, soul. So this term comes from the Indo-European root meaning to breathe. And the distinction between soul and spirit also developed in Abrahamic religions. And in Hebrew, the root meaning is also to breathe. Now, let me just stop for 1 second and give my opinion on this. So to breathe, people understand that that's like when people say Gesundheit. In a sense, they believe that your sneezing is the most, in a sense, violent action that the human body does without our control, in a sense, in a way. And what they thought is that when you sneezed, your soul, the breath, went out of your mouth. And so you, in a sense, were a body without a soul. And then the soul is, in a sense, coming back in. and then thank God it came back in. So that's what like they're blessing you for sneezing in a sense. But it also has to do with the fact of believing in the spirit has to do with the soul, because they've thought that when you stop breathing or when you start to breathe, like they talk about in the Bible, the breath of life, that in a sense a baby if it's born is not actually alive in a sense until it gets the breath of life. Some languages use the word spirit, often closely related to some as mind, and include like a ghost in the machine kind of an idea. It's hard when today it seems like us unbelievers are up against everything religions, somethingism gods, and know-nothing people. Science and religion are different epistemologies. The basic outline of a scientific epistemology to me will be science, hypothesis, which is rationalism, plus testing, empiricism, checking for errors, skepticism equals scientific laws, collaborating from other kinds of inquiry equals scientific theory equals justified true belief equals scientific knowledge. Then here's my basic outline of religious epistemology. Religious, cultural, testimony, scripture, revelations, prophecies, or arbitrary ways of knowing things, or idealism. And mysticism, spiritualism, theology, in other words, arbitrary explanations of idealism, or even a misuse of rationalism with self-justifying nonsense beyond real justification. Equals denial of relevant alternatives. In other words, they use fideism or dogmatic foundationalism or a form of anti-skepticism. Plus, they add superstition, misconceptions, fantasy, which are unsubstantiated ideas, and most likely, again, idealism, equals religion, reality theory, which equals unjustified faith beliefs, which equals religious faith believed as knowledge. So spiritual non-religious, I hear this all the time, especially by people that are on the woo-woo side, and whether they're atheists or not, they'll say this: I'm spiritual but non-religious. Spiritual, as I said, is not a word really. It comes from the idea of that our breath was actually our soul, and it was connected to it. But this to me is just animistic somethingism. You need to reject the fideism or faithism foolishness. Faithism or fideism, the act of thinking like the faith drunk, a belief that religious claims are validated by the belief in faith that one has. As if to such faith-drunk thinkers, their faith is some kind of proof or evidence, or magical superstition claims are devoid of external evidence and don't need it. Or faithism, fideism, faith-drunk thinkers involving in thinking that faith is superior to evidence or reason in relation to superstitious, magical, or religious claims, which is a relativistic kind of epistemology at best. Now, to me, this is like the alien believer said that her beliefs or their beliefs were a lot like, religion. Well, yes, if you're using the method of faith, it is exactly like, no matter if you're an atheist or not, because it has to do with the faith problem. The extent of other religions present in fundamental question to fideists, if faith, the faith drunk, is the only way to know the truth of a God. How are we to know which gods, to have faith in to begin with? Fideism alone is not any kind of accurate, not any adequate guide to distinguish true or morally viable proposed revelations from false ones. An apparent consequence of fideism is that all religion thinking becomes equally guessing. I reject the odd thinking aliens were here in the past too. Just another form of faith. Why keep talking about atheism or pushing reason? Well, because we can change people's lives if we never stop speaking the truth, that religion and God are a lie, and faith is an invalid method. It frees people to live lives given to reason. I do believe you can reason people out of faith. To think otherwise is patronizing, that people can never change by reason. But counseling, often a kind of reason therapy, demonstrates just the opposite. Thus, in this way, reason is hope. The doubt of your faith is not God testing you. It is your rationality trying to emerge and free you. Faith is an empty box. What proof is faith? When there is not anything one could not claim on faith about wanting to believe something with no proof or evidence at all. Faith is an invalid method to know reality qualities of the world. Thus, every theory, including ancient aliens, posed from or with faith is equally invalid, since all ghosts, gods, souls, spirits, Bigfoot, aliens, religions require faith at some point in the believing ownership process, as or in place of evidence and or valid reasoning about reality. Therefore, there are automatically invalid claims due to the limitations of the use of faith, not being able to produce things into reality. Moreover, faitheists like to claim that I cannot see the truth of what they propose on faith because I don't have faith. You're right, I don't use faith, and neither should you. This just sounds like a fideist mythology, that they think faith is better than reason, or possibly even better than evidence. But remind you, faith is strong belief, either without evidence or contrary to evidence and reason. Thus, in the acquisition of knowledge, faith is not worth believing in, and furthermore, if it takes faith to see a thing as real, then you're admitting such a thing has nothing to do with reality. The term faith itself derives from fideus, a Latin word for faith that can be rendered to literally faithism.
Alien believer response. I'm an alien believer, and here's a video called Pole Shift that is quite fascinating, and I am convinced that reptiles inhabit this planet.
I'm going to address this issue of the pole shift. A shifting of the Earth's poles has been predicted to occur in the near future by a number of psychics. Like we listen to them, including some that are renowned. This certainly is not scientific prediction, but some scientists believe that it is at least possible that this could happen in some future date, but perhaps has happened many times in our planet's past. Whether or not we could survive a physical shift of the Earth's poles is an open debate, not a scientific proof. It could be much more catastrophic than even described in the people's psychics' claims, or it could be less. There are two ways of considering what is meant by a pole shift. A geological or actual shift of the Earth's crust literally slips around its molten core, like a loose peel on an orange. altering the position of the land masses in respect to the planet's rotation on its axes, which could happen by a few degrees or many degrees. Antarctica could wind up at the equator. Miami could end up at the North Pole. The effects to our civilization would be devastating. A shift of the magnetic poles only. As it is, the Earth's magnetic north, and north encompasses point 2, is not exactly the same as true North Pole. The magnetic pole is not fixed and can move. In fact, scientists are fairly certain that it has shifted by as much as 180 degrees several times in the past. This change may be sudden or it may be gradual, taking place over hundreds or even thousands of years. The effect on life on the planet would probably be minimal, though, affecting perhaps the majority of migratory or homing instincts of some animals. Ultimately, if you put stock in such things, you understand the reference to this shift type has been written that there will be an upheaval of the Arctic, and it will cause an eruption of volcanoes and torrids and pole shifts. And when you ask what great changes, or the beginning of what change, if any, is to take place in the Earth, and this is referring to back before 2000. It's talking about 2000, 2001. It says that where there is a shift in the poles, a new cycle begins. Obviously, that they missed the date. But this is interesting to note that the current concerns is over climate change and ice glaciers. And then have these catastrophic pole shifts actually happened before? Well, aside from psychic prediction of pole shifts to come and the possible calamities, the supporters of climatic pole shifts or cataclysmic pole shifts hypothesis have suggested that the cataclysmic global pole shifts, like those predicted, have actually happened in the past. These shifts, they claim, result in extremely rapid change in the location of the Earth's geography, rather than in magnetic poles as well as the axis or spin of the planet. In fact, in an 1872 article, it addressed this, the chronology historic of Mexicans. An expert in Mesoamerican and Aztec manuscripts interpreted the native myths, writing, and maps as indicating that at least 4 such pole shifts had occurred beginning around 12,500 years ago. In 1948, it was claimed that a massive weight of accumulating ice on the Earth's poles caused the axis shift every 4,000 to 7,000 years. By 1948, scientists had confirmed that the Earth does indeed wobble on its axis, causing the planet's outer crust to drift on its mantle below. And it is argued that the wobble and drift effect made future cataclysmic polar shifts inevitable, and suggests that the use of nuclear weapons to break up the polar ice caps. Talk about ridiculousness. In a controversial book in 1950, the historian cites ancient manuscripts and archaeological artifacts from the world as evident at around 3,500 years ago. Venus in the form of a comet-like object ejected from Jupiter past Earth and orbit axial, it had devastating results. Anyways, I'm going to skip some of that. You can read more if you want. What science says and history says. While the earth science and experts agree the geological movement of the poles has occurred in the past, the rate and extent it has been smaller, far smaller, and less catastrophic impact than predicted by supposed pole shift theorists. According to science, the extent of past polar shift drift has been less than 1 degree per million years or slower. So while people in the 50s had ideas, and while ancient alien people still have these ideas, they're not scientific. And the geographic record indicates that geological poles have not deviated by more than 5 degrees over the past 130 million years.
Alien believer response. Here's a video about non-human DNA found in elongated Paracus skulls.
Okay, so some people have this flawed belief that elongated skulls means ancient aliens. Well, the first possible evidence for skull modification among our ancestors actually comes from a 45,000-year-old Neanderthal skulls. Both in Sindar 1 and Sindar 5 exhibit seeming evidence of artificial cranial deformation. I have looked at all the archaeological from 1 million years to 2,000 years ago for the book that I'm working on, and because I care about how things happen in the past in relation to what is religion. And not one of them hints to aliens. Show me an article from Archaeology to support such claims.
Alien believer response. Here's a video called Egyptian Pharaoh DNA Not of This World.
Okay. In my response, ancient alien culture is fascinating to travelers and dwellers and millions to draws millions to the country every year. But of what we think we know about the pyramids, mummies, hieroglyphs, it is not factually true. Blame it on outdated research or films like Indiana Jones and the Mummy. Here is 15 myths about the ancient Egyptians you can look at in this link that will be provided in my blog. I will address the first one, the one that relates to the ancient aliens. So this is a fact about Egyptian. Ancient Egyptians are claimed to communicate with extraterrestrials. Nonsense. Some believe the pyramids were built by ancient colonists, ancient alien colonists, or they communicated with ancient aliens. And it's evident they believe in ancient Egyptian artwork. TV programs, like the History Channel's absolute nonsense Ancient Alien show, promotes such ideas with the flimsiest of evidence, or no evidence at all, or misinterpret evidence. In fact, Egyptians were skilled engineers, and it is shown in the record, without any help of non-human forms or multi-dimensional anything. And this has to do with the pyramids, and mostly structured around the way they were built in massive tomb structures. And instances of these alien-like figures in artwork and murals were perfectly mundane explanations according to standard Egyptologists. And DNA discovery reveals genetic history of the ancient Egyptians. Finding in Nature Communications, the study concluded that the remains found in Middle Egypt were closer genetic relatives to the Neolithic and Bronze Age populations from the Near East, from Turkey, Anatolia, or the Eastern Mediterranean Europeans. Modern Egyptians, by comparison, share much more DNA with sub-Saharan populations. The findings have turned years of theory on its head, and this would include the ancient alien theory as well, causing Egyptologists to reevaluate the region's history while unlocking new tools for scientists working the field. Analyzing simple samples spanning over 1,000 years, researchers looked for genetic differences compared with Egyptians today. They found that the samples showed a set of strong characteristics clustering with ancient non-African populations, not non-human, based from the east of the Mediterranean Sea. The research data set gained from looking at the mitochondrial genomes. This is not just the DNA of one person, mind you. It is the DNA of the parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, great-great-grandparents, and so forth. The genetics show the community did not undergo any major shifts during the 1,300 time span studied. So, no, there's no ancient alien DNA, and this was done by the group from the Max Planck Institute. My blog on ancient aliens has real truth. No aliens found by science ever, anywhere, and certainly not in the DNA of Egyptians.
Alien believer response. Evidence for you, scientists, archaeologists, geologists, speaking the truth of ancient aliens. Here's a video called Something is Not Adding Up Here. They are hiding it.
Ancient aliens, megastructures has been debunked, and astronomers finally explain the weirdest star in the universe to which you are trying to, in a sense, in your video, relate to.
Alien believer response. Your comments on this video. This is crazy. I couldn't believe what he said. Aliens want to take over the United States. Please. Look at it.
Oh, I already gave you a link with an archaeological explanation, which, like me, has informed you that the truth, if you want to believe otherwise, go for it. I will not watch your anything, as I want valid facts, not wishful thinking and conspiracy theories. My opinion is that I don't have time for mythology, old or new. According to the Smithsonian and the blog called The Idiocy and Fabrication Lies of Ancient Aliens, here is some educated thoughts by Brian Schwick, a freelance science writer specializing in evolution, paleontology, and natural history. He blogs regularly for Scientific American. And he stated this in 2012. I have ambitiously avoided ancient aliens. I had a feeling that if I watched the show, which popularizes far-fetched, evidence-free idiocy about how human history had been molded by extraterrestrial visitors, my brain would jostle its way out of my skull and stalk the earth to search for a kinder host. Or, at the very least, watching the show would kill about as many brain cells as a weekend bender in Las Vegas. But I heard the History Channel slurring pseudoscience that had been taken on dinosaurs. I sealed myself for the pain and watched the mind-melting madness unfold of Ancient Aliens. I am actually glad that my editors don't allow me to cuss a blue streak on this blog. And this, by the way, is not my words. This has to do with the writer. If they did, my entire review would be little more than a string of expletives. Given my reactions, given my restrictions, I have little choice but to try to extrapolate the documentary format rubbish in more coherent and reader sensitive way. The episode is what you would get if you dropped some creationist propaganda. Eric von Daniken's Chariots of the Gods and stock footage from Jurassic Fight Club into a blender. What results is a slimy and incomprehensible mix of idle speculation and outright fabrication, which pit the enthusiast ancient alien theorists, as the narrator generously calls them, against mainstream science. I would say you can't make this stuff up, but I have a feeling that is exactly what most of this show's personalities are doing. There was so much wrong with the Ancient Aliens episode, I could spend all week trying to contradict every incorrect assertion, which is how I feel also dealing with this blog. This is a common technique among cranks and self-appointed charlatans or challengers of science. It is called Gishligop. After young Earth creationist Dwayne Gish. When giving public presentations about evolution and creationism, Gish rapidly spouted off a series of misinterpretations and falsehoods to bury his opponents under an avalanche of fictions and distortions. If Gish's opponents tried to dig themselves out, they would never be able to make enough progress to free themselves to take on Gish directly. Ancient Aliens uses the same tactic. The fictions come fast and furious.
Ancient believer response. Fair enough. You asked for archaeology input, so I gave it to you. And indeed, you believe what you deem true, and so do I.
My response. You did not give me what I asked for. And the first one I have shown you was wrong. A misunderstanding or lack of understanding is called ignorance. And when one looks at the unknown or non-understood and makes a truth claim, this fallacious thinking is what philosophy calls an argument from ignorance, which is that the video you offered is doing. When you don't really know, wild guessing is intellectual lying if you claim it is true. If one is speculating and stating them in any kind of truth way. Argument from ignorance is also known as an appeal to ignorance, in which ignorance represents a lack of contrary evidence, is a fallacious and informal logic. It asserts that a proposition is true because it has not yet been proven false, or a proposition is false because it has not yet been proven true. This represents a type of false dichotomy, in that it excludes the possibility that there may have been an insufficient investigation to prove that the proposition is either true or false. It also does not allow for the possibility that answers are unknowable, only knowable at a future time, or neither completely true or completely false, as stated.
Ancient believer response. Okay, so you're saying that archaeologists and geologists interviewed don't know what they're talking about?
My response. This relates to axiological presumptive value. Let me explain. Claims such as Bigfoot, gods, or aliens are presumptive value claims, all requiring a valid, reliable justification to assure its soundness or its claimed truth has an access to accuracy actually available to reason so or in its failure. If not, if you haven't given the actual reason or justification, it's a failure. Simply, if you presume a thing is of value that you can't justify, then you have committed an axiological presumptive value failure. Axiological presumptive value success is when a sound thinker uses disciplined rationality, which is sound axiological judgment, the evaluation of evidence, to make a decision supporting a valid and reliable justification. Axiological presumptive value failure is when a shallow thinker is undisciplined thinker, situational thinker, sporadic thinker, limited thinker, unsound axiological judgment lacking required evidence to make such a presumptive value success. Decision. Lacking the support of a needed, valid, and reliable justification. Often I get disheartened to see that so many can look at the unknown or that which is devoid of any and all understanding and claim to know that this is evidence for, enter whatever you want, Bigfoot, gods, aliens. How can they, with all honesty, even say they somehow already know about an established scientific unknown, when all along it is what it ever was, which I will remind you is currently holding a confirmed status of unknown, thus still fully intact as currently unknowable, i.e., you simply cannot justify claims that such unknown as Bigfoot, God, or aliens, or evidence of Bigfoot, God, or aliens. What really is a Bigfoot, a God, or an alien anyway? The term Bigfoot, God, or alien equals mystery. That is used to explain the mysterious, leaving us with yet more mystery, explaining nothing. Claims of Bigfoot, gods, or aliens are presumptive value failures. Simply, if you presume a thing is of value that you can't justify, then you have committed an axiological presumptive value failure. Axiological presumptive value success, again, a sound thinker uses disciplined rationality, sound axiological judgment, evaluation of evidence to make their decision, supported by valid and reliable justification. There are no valid archaeologists claiming that there is proof of aliens. What you have is pseudo-historians. Let me remind you what a pseudo-historian is. Pseudo-history is a form of pseudo-scholarship that attempts to distort or misrepresent the historical record, often using methods resembling those used by legitimate historical research. Pseudo-history frequently presents a big lie or sensational claim about historical facts, which would require the revision or rewriting of historical record. The related term cryptohistory applied to a pseudo-history based upon or derived from superstitions inherent in occultism. Pseudo-history is related to pseudoscience and pseudo-archaeology, and use of the terms in many occasions will overlap. Pseudo-history presents many of the same challenges to mainstream academic history as pseudoscience does, but with certain specific differences. The most important difference is that history is an academic discipline rather than a scientific one. This means that mainstream history is very dependent on a set of shared ethical academic standards and methods and or peer review. However, supporters of pseudo-historical theories often specifically deny the validity of the mainstream standards and methods and discourse of peer review process, or denounce the peer review process as prejudice towards academic establishment, attempting instead to gain popular appeal. This lack of common ground can often make it difficult for mainstream historians to refute the pseudo-historian claims. Pseudo-history is often born out of a desire to achieve a particular predetermined result, often to justify some present-day action or agenda, or in some cases, past belief like Ancient Aliens. Pseudo-history, which Ancient Aliens is often combined with pseudo-archaeology, as compiled with belief in alleged ancient civilizations as Atlantis, or with the teachings of New Age sources, claims historical events and timelines which did not actually happen. If you believe in aliens, then likely you know the con Zecharia Sitchin, which Skeptics magazine addresses Zecharia Sitchin and the Earth Chronicles. This is what they said. Zecharia Sitchin, along with Eric von Däniken and Immanuel Velikovsky, make up the holy trinity of pseudo-historians. Each begins with the assumption of ancient myths are not myths, but historical and scientific texts, which is nonsense. Sitchin's claim to fame is announcing that he alone correctly reads ancient Sumerian tablets. Bullshit. Of course he didn't announce this by taking out an ad in the New York Times, but by implying it with his translations that do not jibe with the work of legitimate scholars of the field. If Sitchin is right, then all other scholars have misread these tablets, which according to Sitchin reveals from the tablets, his reading, that gods from another planet, Nubru, which orbits the sun every 3,600 years, arrived on Earth 450,000 years ago and created humans by genetically engineering female apes. Nonsense. Nubru orbits beyond Pluto and is heated from within by radioactive decay according to Sitchin. Funny though, no other scientist has discovered that these descendants of gods who blew themselves up with nuclear weapons some 4,000 years ago, according to the War of the Gods and Men, page 310. Sitchin alone can look at Sumerian tablets, come up with something no one else did, and see that it to him depicts a man being subjected to radiation. He alone knows how to correctly translate ancient terms, allowing him alone to discover such amazing things alone. As in ancient made rockets on page 46. Yet, he does not seem to know that the seasons are caused by the Earth's tilt. Interesting. How scientific is he? And not by its distance from the sun. Sitchin was born in Russia, raised in Palestine, and graduated from the University of London with a degree in economic history. He worked, and so I've heard claim before that he's an archaeologist. He's not. He worked for years as a journalist and an editor in Israel before settling in New York. Sitchin, like Philosopher, and I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong, probably am, presents himself as a scholarly in a number of books, including The 12th Planet he wrote in 1976 and The Cosmic Code in 1998. Both Sitchin and Balashowski write very knowledgeable of ancient myths, and both are nearly scientifically illiterate. But, like Donegan and Balashowski, Sitchin weaves a compelling and entertaining story out of facts, misinterpretations, fictions, speculations, misquotes, mistranslations, etc. Each of these pseudo-historians begins with their beliefs about ancient visitors from other worlds, and then proceeds to fit facts and fictions to their basic hypothesis. Each is a master in ignoring the inconvenient facts, making mysteries where there are none before, and offering their ancient alien hypothesis to solve these supposed mysteries. Their works are very attractive to those who love a good mystery and like ignoring the facts or ignoring the nature and limits of scientific knowledge. They are especially attracted to those who are ignorant of biblical and historical scholarship. Sitchin promotes himself as a biblical scholar and a master of ancient languages. But his real mastery is in making up his own translations of Bible texts and supporting his readings of Sumerian and Akkadian writings. This is a quote from it. He let us know he's going to twist the translations around to support his thesis. Indeed, a reader of Sitchin's book would do well to keep a couple Bibles handy to check up on the verses Sitchin quotes. Many of them will sound odd or unrecognizable because they have been translated from their familiar form. This is made harder by the fact that Sitchin rarely tells you just which verse he is quoting. This would be much more acceptable if he wasn't using the twisted translations to support his theories that led to the twisted translations. Most of Sitchin's sources are obsolete. He has received nothing but ridicule from the scientific archaeologists, scholars familiar with ancient languages. His most charming quality seems to be his vivid imagination and complete disregard for established facts or methods of inquiry. Traits that are apparently very attractive to some people who want to believe in aliens. Sitchin's ideas have been appropriated by others. Go ahead.
Okay, ancient alien believer response. Damien AtHope. Interesting that you should mention Stitchin. He is one of the many acknowledging advanced civilization. But hey, it doesn't worry me. Really, it's neither here or there. The fact that Newbury was observed through the Hubble telescope either. I'm simply interested in our origins and how the hell humans built those pyramids with technology unavailable to us today.
My response: Nibiru, the non-existent planet, by NASA. No. According to Space.com 2018, Nibiru is linked to the close of the Mayan calendar, a variety of rumors spreading regarding ways the world could end back in 2012. One popular considered was Nibiru, a supposed planet that some claimed would collide with the Earth at the end of the year in 2012. I guess it didn't. But despite the buzz, there is no scientific evidence supporting the alleged planet's even existence. So you're wrong. Quit reading the propaganda. And, of course, our planet did survive in 2012, as we know, without absorbing any massive impact. Nibiru has been linked to NASA by various bloggers, including your claim, because of its claimed connection with the space agency. Officials put out a statement saying that no big planet was coming to destroy the Earth in 2012. That follows below is the true science and history of the supposed rogue planet. The reference to a real object, Comet Ellen, that some got mixed up with the whole mess. And we'll also talk about another hypothetical world that may actually exist in the far outer system, Planet 9. And there's a link for that. So let's go back to Nibiru, though. What is the origins of this myth you said that you know about? The story began in 1976 with, guess who? Zecharia Sitchin, who wrote there was a 12th planet. A book which Sitchin's own unique translation, of course, of the Sumerian cruciform to identify such planet Nibiru, orbiting the sun every 3,600 years. Several years later, another person, a self-described psychic, announced that an alien she claimed to channel had warned her this planet would collide with Earth in 2003. After a collision-free year, the date was moved to 2012, of course, to mix with the Mayan calendar beliefs, where it was linked. When the comet Alien appeared in 2011, many were concerned that it was the mysterious planet in disguise, despite the fact that the planet and the comets appear very different under a telescope. Speaking of, you said people saw it in a telescope. A comet has a gas atmosphere called a coma and a tail, while a planet does not. But instead of slamming into Earth, the comet stayed too close to the sun and broke into pieces. The leftover fragments will continue on their path to the outer solar system for the next 12,000 years. Still bits of comet and not more of a cohesive planet. But what about evidence for Nibiru, right? Proponents of this fictitious planet note that in 1984 a scientific paper was published in Astrophysical Journal Letters, which discussed several inframed sources with no counterparts that turned up in a survey of the sky. Such surveys are common in astronomy and usually invoke follow-ups that individually detail and more interesting sources. In the follow-up in 1984 survey, most of the sources turned out to be distant galaxies. None were identified as planets. Both papers were available to the public. A planet with an orbit so eccentric that it took 3,600 years to orbit the sun would create instabilities inside our 4.5 billion year old solar system. After only a few trips, its gravity would have significantly disrupted other planets, whose gravitational pushes would have changed the hypothetical world's orbit significantly. Once again, science, way better than faith. The earliest and most verifiable piece of evidence arguing against the existence of a theoretical planet can be performed by anyone. According to the information available, a planet with a 3,600-year life orbit that was due to impact the Earth supposedly in 2012 should be able to be seen by the supposed naked eye. Easily performed calculations show that by April 2012, it would have been brighter than the faintest star viewed from the city, and almost as bright as Mars at its dimmest. This would have made it visible to astronomers everywhere. The most common rebuttal to this is the cry of cover-up, which the ancient alien believer either has done or will do, and all generally tend to do because they want to believe the lies. However, there are hundreds of thousands of amateur astronomers around the world, many of whom have their own telescopes, not to mention their own cell phones to post it out, if there was something. On top of that, most of the thousands of professional astronomers are linked not to the government, but rather to private universities. Astronomer David Morrison pointed out in 2012 that NASA and the government get most of their information from the outside astronomers, not the other way around. Between the amateur and the professional astronomers, there are plenty of people who would have noticed a new star in the sky. But let's understand there's nothing to fear. Doomsday reports come across the internet frequently, inciting fear, but interestingly to note, they are nothing new. Perhaps they have been decried at the end of the world for 100 years. Rumors spread like wildfire on the internet, but the same technology can make it easier than ever to delve into the scientific evidence about such events and understand the facts.
Ancient believer response. I get into debates with other atheists on a regular basis about alien life. They will back you up all the way, and it's okay. I still love them, and they still love me, and I love you too, my friend.
My response. Please get informed. On this is not what you think. Sitchin's ideas have been rejected by science and academics who dismiss his work as pseudoscience and pseudohistory. His work has been criticized for flawed mythologies and misunderstandings of ancient texts, as well as incorrect astronomical and scientific claims. Here is a link. And Michael Tellinger is another con I bet you believe in, right? Michael, who, right? It's a South African crank of the week, Michael Tellinger, in 2005, when he published The Slave Species of God. The slave species, essentially a plagiaristic telling of the ideas of Zacharias Sitchin. The idea goes like this. There is another large planet in our solar system, unknown to science, named Nibiru. It spends most of its time in the outer solar systems, but its highly elliptical orbit brings it to the inner solar system every 3,600 years ago. What happens is it has weird gravitational interactions with Earth, causing the mantle all manner of catastrophes, including but not limited to geographic pole shifts. Nibiru is claimed to have been inhabited by a super intelligent race of aliens called the Anunnaki, who from time to time are believed to have visited the earth and its inhabitants, meddling with, creating, and enslaving local apes. Eventually, believed that it founded the human race, essentially, as well as laying the foundations for all our technology and our entire civilization. Nonsense. If the term Nibiru or Anunnaki sounds familiar to you, you will recognize that they are names that have arisen from this pseudo-version of Sumerian mythology. Sitchin and Tellinger use a creative, silly, wrong set of translations for ancient Sumerian texts and symbols to so-called prove that just about all ancient mythology should be taken as literal. Historical fact. Just replace the terms God with angels and so on with aliens. And you're all set.
Alien believer response. I am a fairly practical individual, Damien, and seriously, you will never convince me human beings built the pyramids.
My response. I know full well about the pyramids, and they are connected to a large religious behavior linked to China and Europe, as well as Siberia and Turkey, as well as other areas in the Middle East and other parts of Africa. The pyramids in 4,000 connect to Kurgans at 7,000 to 6,000 years ago and dolmens of 7,000 to 6,000 years ago.
Alien believer response. Okay, can we agree to disagree? Yes, there's too much practical information to say that we didn't build those.
My response, no, wrong, wrong, and wrong. There you go again with more false claims. I have facts for everything I said. You offered claims I have debunked with facts. And the other is also an argument from ignorance. So you can logically disagree, illogically disagree, but I will not agree. I, as I said, do care what you choose to believe. But you don't get to beg me to check it out or offer it as any kind of truth without my challenging. I was letting it go, but as it does not matter to me, but you wanted my response, so I gave it. I find that what you asked and I offered. If you now wish to move on, cool. I was blowing this off already anyway. I find such beliefs odd but not harmful, like theism. Though, let's address your issue. So how were the pyramids built? You act as if we don't know. We do know. According to lifescience.com, over the past 2 decades, research have been making a number of discoveries relating to the pyramids, including a town built near the pyramids, a study showing how water can make blocks easier to move, and a papyrus found by the Red Sea. These have allowed researchers to gain a better understanding of how the Giza pyramids were built. The new finds add to other knowledge gained over the past 200 years. The techniques used to build the Giza pyramids were developed over a period of 100 years or more. Centuries. With all of the problems and setbacks that any modern-day scientist or engineer would face. Pyramids originated from simple rectangular tombs that were being made or constructed in Egypt over 5,000 years ago. According to finds made by archaeologists, a major advance occurred during the reign of Pharaoh Djoser. His reign started about 4,630 years ago. Another leap in pyramid building techniques came during the reign of Pharaoh Sufru, reigned about 4,575 years ago, who built at least 3 pyramids. Rather than constructing step pyramids as before, the Sifru's, I'm probably saying these names wrong, but architects developed methods to design smooth-faced, what we call now true pyramids. Once again, the pyramids show in Egypt that there's an evolution. First step pyramids, very rough, better step pyramids, then smooth-faced pyramids, or what's called true pyramids. It appears that Snufu's architects ran into trouble, though. One of the pyramids he constructed at the site of Dashur is known today as the bent pyramid because of the angle of the pyramid changes partway up, giving the structure a bent appearance, like humans would make it. Scholars generally regard the bent angle as being a result of a design flaw, like by humans. Sefru's architects would correct the flaw in a second pyramid built at Dishvar, whatever. Known today as what's called the Red Pyramid, so named after the color of its stones. It has a constant angle, making it a true pyramid. Sefru's son, Khufu, would use the lessons from the father, like humans learn, and earlier predecessors to construct the Great Pyramid, the largest pyramid in the world. Researchers are working to understand the sophisticated planning that went into it to building the pyramid, which requires construction not just of the pyramids, but also was planning needed for temples and pits, boat pits, and cemeteries located near these enormous structures. Researchers have noted that Egyptians had the ability to align structures to true north very precisely, something that may have helped in planning the pyramids. An engineer who studied the pyramids at Giza, part of the ancient Egyptian research associates, noted that Khufu's pyramid is aligned to true north with 1/12 of a degree, within 1/12 of a degree. 1/10, excuse me. How the ancient Egyptians did this is not fully clear. In a report published, though, recently in the newsletter, it said that a circumpolar star like Polaris and lines of rope were likely used as part of this method. Over the past few years, archaeologists with this group have been excavating and studying a port at Giza that would have been used to bring in supplies, food, and people. The papyrus found at Wabi La Jarf allude to the importance of the Giza port, saying that limestone blocks used in the outer casting of the pyramid were supplied from quarries. Were shipped from quarries to the pyramid site within a few days using boat transport. The port that the archaeologists found is located by a town built near Mekanur's pyramid. This town had sizable homes of high officials, a complex that likely held troops, and buildings where large numbers of clay seals used to record keeping were found. The ordinary workers likely slept in simple dwellings near the pyramid. Estimates given by various archaeologists for the size of the workforce at Giza tend, however, at about 10,000 people for all three pyramids. These people were well fed, a study published in 2013 showed. The chief research officer and colleagues found that enough cattle, sheep, and goats were slaughtered every day to produce 4,000 pounds of meat on average to feed the pyramid builders. The findings was detailed in a book called Proceedings of the 10th Meeting of the ICAZ Working Group, Archaeology, Southwest Asia, and Advanced Adjunct Areas, published in 2013. Reading used the animal bones remains found at Gaza and in Giza and the nutritional requirements for a person doing hard labor to make the discovery. Also found animals were brought in from sites of the Nile Delta and kept in corrals until they were slaughtered and fed to the workers. The workers' meat-rich diet may have been an inducement for people to work on the pyramids. They probably got much better diets than they got in their villages, as reported in 2013. Let's get on to the stones themselves. To move the stones overland, the Egyptians would have used large sledges that could have been pushed or pulled by gangs of workers. The sand in front of the sledge was likely dampened with water, something that reduces its friction, making it easier to move the sledge. A team of physicists from the University of Amsterdam found in a study in 2014 in the Journal of Physical Review Letters, it turned out that wetting Egyptian desert sand can reduce the friction quite a bit, which implies you need only half the people to pull the sledge on the wet sand compared to dry sand. A physics professor at the University of Amsterdam and lead author of the study told Live Science in 2004. The scientist said that scenes in ancient Egyptian artwork show water being poured in front of the sledges. Most Egyptologists agree that when the stones arrived at the pyramid, a system of ramps was used to haul up the stones. However, Egyptologists are uncertain how the ramps were designed. Little evidence of the ramp survives, but several hypothetical designs have been proposed over the last few decades. New data may come from the scanning of the pyramid mission, an integral initiative being taken place by researchers at 3 different universities. And let's go back to what you stated. There's too much practical information to say that we didn't build these. With no support at all, you state this. When you have the burden of proof, obligation, you still fail to meet as an intellectual honesty and the ethics of belief require. You say there's too much practical information to say that we didn't build those. No, there actually is no evidence but humans doing all of this. Don't state untruth as truth. The burden of proof, let me remind you, is an obligation on the party in a trial or produce evidence that will prove the claim they have made against the other party. In a legal dispute, one party is initially presumed to be correct, and gets the benefit of the doubt, while the other party bears the burden of proof. When the party bearing the burden of proof meets the burden of proof switches to the other side. Something you've not done. The burden may be of different kinds for each party in different phases of litigation. Burden of production is a minimal burden to produce at least enough evidence for the trier of fact to consider a disputed claim. After participants have met their burden of proof, which you have not, or burden of production, which you have not, and their claim is being considered by the trier of fact, they have the burden of persuasion that enough evidence has been presented to persuade the trier of fact that their side is correct. There are different standards of persuasiveness ranging from preponderance of evidence, where there is just enough evidence to tip the balance, to proof beyond reasonable doubt, as in the United States criminal courts. The burden of proof is always on the person who brings the claim in dispute. The party that does not carry the burden of proof carries the benefit of assumption of being correct, which in this thing would be the default position, or what's called the nil hypothesis, which states that it is that the alternative hypothesis, such as ancient aliens is real, is not proven and has to be assumed false until proven. Burden of proof in philosophy is the obligation on a party in a dispute to provide sufficient warrant for their position. When two parties are in a discussion and one makes a claim that the other disputes, the one who makes the claim typically has the burden of proof to justify or substantiate the claim, especially when challenges as present status quo. Like saying the status quo is that no one's found aliens, you say they are, and that reptilians are taking over the planet. You have to produce this. The proof, the evidence, the justification, the warrant. This is also relates to things like what's called Christopher Hitchens' razor, or Carl Sagan, who proposed a similar thing of the Sagan standard, that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. This also relates to intellectual honesty, which is honesty in the acquisition, analysis, and transmission of ideas. A person is being intellectually honest when he or she, knowing the truth, states the truth. There are disincentives to intellectual honesty. Academics find themselves pressured to argue for stances of their benefactors, including governments or private entities that fund grants In fact, this is trained into them in education, as the same pressures are exerted by teachers and professionals upon their students, professors onto their students. Judges may face political pressure to render a judicial opinion, endorse a legal argument they know to be flawed. But this doing so is intellectual dishonesty. Auditors may issue a favorable opinion of a company's financial statement despite having serious misgivings about their adherence to generally acceptable accounting practices in order to continue receiving business from this company. In general, perverse incentives and conflicts of interest provide high fertile ground for intellectual dishonesty. The more complicated the issue and the murkier the facts, the easier it is for an intellectual to get away with presenting a plausible but flawed argument. I don't know, like ancient aliens. In a world where people, including intellectuals, often pursue incentives more eagerly than seek after high ideals, it is important that ways be found to make the interests of intellectuals coexist with the interests of those whose well-being depends on intellectual honesty. In intellectual dishonesty is to be consistently avoided. Some intellectual dishonesty can be subtle. For example, relevant facts or information may be purposely omitted or left out when such things contradict one's chosen hypothesis. Or facts may be presented in a biased manner or twisted to give misleading impressions. Broadly speaking, any of the following behaviors would fall under intellectual dishonesty. Arguing a viewpoint that you yourself disbelieve. Exception. The role of the devil's advocate is the only exception, but that's only if you explain it that you're not believing it. Exception also is arguing in practice debates deliberately. This also is intellectual dishonesty, is deliberately ignoring facts and arguments that would undermine your position, or it's also called willful ignorance, or knowingly using a logical fallacy is intellectually dishonest. And now that I've explained to you argument from ignorance, I've explained to you your burden of proof, and I've explained to you intellectual honesty, if you continue to do this, you are being intentionally using a logical fallacy and thus are being intellectually dishonest. Common forms of intellectual dishonesty include plagiarism, applying double standards, false analogies, exaggeration, overgeneralization, presenting straw man arguments, poisoning the well, which is a philosophy term, not literally poisoning the well. A form of intellectual dishonesty common on conservative sites like Conservapedia, which is uses the suppression of evidence that contradicts their orthodoxy by without explanations, any edit that that links to and otherwise presents such evidence. But in fact, to the alien believer, read my blogs. If you want interesting history, that is what's real. Is amazing.
Alien believer response. Lift a 70-ton rock at the top of a pyramid. The air vents are so precise that even modern engineering cannot replicate this accuracy. And I can go on, but I am not about trying to change your opinion. You are entitled to it.
My response: so you don't know something to make a truth claim? No. According to the vintagenews.com, posted in 2017, it took 12 men, excuse me, 2 hours to carve out the 70-ton rock. The block of limestone was loaded into the modern boat using a crane, but believes the Egyptians' rock was cracked before loading to make the work easier. The rock had to be very specific positions to keep the boat upright, as the quarries were upstream into the valley. The workers could easily row the current and then use their sails to move the empty boat back up the river to another load. The boat was sailing and was tried to move across the river rather than along the current, and was found was nearly impossible. They realized in order to succeed, they must have mimicked the ancient Egyptians and arrive with the limestone boat intact. It is believed by Egyptologists that the Great Pyramid was originally built to serve as a tomb for the Old Kingdom's 6th dynasty pharaoh, and was sealed with all the funerary equipment and other things needed to reach for the king's afterlife. Here is a picture that shows a corridor. It's not even, and any stonemason could do a better job today. And so your claim that their air vents are so precise that even modern-day engineering cannot replicate their accuracy, again, no, it is not beyond modern engineering. And the picture is one of your claims, where your claim precise air vents. The picture is from inside one of the small shafts of the Great Pyramid. There were some regions in the shafts, like this one, that were less expertly carved.
Alien believer response. The pyramids, as I understand, are not tombs, but merely electrical factories. Have read Nikola Tesla, if you feel like it, and one application which hasn't yet been discovered is the outside chamber and its vibration and sound in hertz. Okay, my poor English. In my opinion, and that way I don't come across as telling a fact, yes? And yes, I will study your videos. I am not biased, as I said, just fascinated. The above, I know, teams of scientists from the world over have stated that the pyramids have been built using unavailable technology to this day. Well, the evidence presented isn't by myself, but eminent scientists.
Well, I'm glad that she finally was honest enough to say that she's not stating facts. Let's go and address the power station theory. The Gaza pyramids have been a cause for more extreme wingnuttery, pseudoscience, bullshit, and woo than any other ancient monument on the planet. They are popular focal points for theories concerning ufology, Illuminati, Atlantis, and certain sects of Christianity as well. People who espouse such ideas in relation to the Gaza pyramid are referred to as pyramid idiots, similar to but not considered with normal idiots. In the classic example of extreme wingnuttery, Christopher Dunn, a mechanical engineer with an interesting history, claims that the Egyptians used machine tools to build the Giza pyramids. He argues how the Great Pyramid the others don't matter to him, was in fact a massive power plant that used magnetic poles and vibrations channeled through harmonic resonators and the dimensions of the structure to generate huge amounts of power before being destroyed in a massive fire caused by the use of hydrogen. Central to his argument is the supposition that the ancient Egyptians had generally ultra-high level of technology, as evidenced by the accuracy and quality of their seeming stonework. In support of this, his points to examples of work with hard stone around the Gaza pyramids and at Seppura. He fails, however, to mention several key points. The Seppura was constructed in the 19th dynasty and used through much of the late period, the time with ample textual and archaeological sources rather than belonging to prehistory as Dunham describes the artifacts. There is absolutely no archaeological or textual evidence whatsoever to support evidence of these hypothetical super technologies. The effect on stone he describes to the use of advanced technology have been accurately reproduced through experimental archaeology using quite simple tools, and that these results have been widely published, including in mass media. That the power station theory he postulates uses integral layout of Khufu's pyramid, which is significantly different from the others at Gaza, let alone elsewhere in Egypt. What the others were for, then, is anyone's guess, right? Whilst the achievements in accuracy and quantity of engineering and workmanship at both Pyramid of Giza and elsewhere in Egyptian scriptures and architecture building, if we were within their capabilities at a Bronze Age civilization, thanks to efficient bureaucratic and social organization that was able to control the quality and speed of work, ability of labor, tools and supplies, and provide literate expertise to oversee and guide the work being done. The theory that the Great Pyramid was some kind of masculine machine was also postulated by author Alan Alford in his book God of the New Millennium, although he later retracted this in the foreword of his follow-up book, The Phoenix Solution. Most were built as tombs. This is stated from the History Channel. Most were built as tombs in the country for pharaohs and their cohorts during the Old and Middle Kingdom periods.
Alien believer response. Nikola Tesla. Please have a look. Peace, man. I am interested, I'm comprising.
My response. Again, the original purpose of a tomb was to protect the dead and provide the deceased with a dwelling, equipping the necessities for the afterlife. Tombs probably arose in the prehistoric practice of burying the dead in their own houses. Eventually, tombs were replaced by graves and funerary urns. And this seen in the dolmens and the kurgans. and the practice of building tombs died out during the Renaissance. Some of the most famous tombs in the world include the pyramids of Egypt.
Alien believer response. Damien Marie AtHope. As you are aware, there are news and the forbidden news, but I might be wrong. Hey.
So then I give a picture that shows the movements of ideas going towards Egypt, coming from other areas. And my response is, to me, there simply is and rightly must be intellectual, ethical belief responsibility. Burden of proof to justify the believed truth that is claimed to others is actually demonstrable as being true with valid and reliable reason and or evidence when it is stated as such. Yes, intellectually one should provide justificationism for their assertions that map the sort of governing good habits of belief formation, belief maintenance, and belief relinquishment. So what's the way of a sound thinker? Sound thinker to me, in a general way, is thinking, reasoning, or beliefs that tend to make foresight the desire to be accurate, as one can with valid and reliable reason and evidence. Sound axiological judgment, to me, axiological presumptive value success, is a value judgment opinions expressed as facts with valid and reliable justification. In an informed and psychological sense, it is used in reference to the quality of cognitive faculties and adjudicial capabilities of particular individuals, typically called wisdom or discernment. In a legal sense, used in a correct of legal trial to refer to a final finding, statement, or ruling based on a consideration of weighing the evidence, called adjudication. A shallow thinker, i.e., not a deep thinker, is a person whose thoughts are reasoned methodologically, logical, empirically, and I'm talking about what a deep thinker is. A deep thinker is reasoned, methodological, logical, empirical. So the shallow thinker quickly talks, often with boastful postulations, which this ancient alien person has done tons of, likely just as often push strongly and loudly as if this adds substance, and they do so before fully understanding what is really involved. Whereas a sound thinker is reasoned, is contemplative, more reasoning, speculative, most reasoned. Generally based on reasoning, being the result of logical thought. As a first debate process, a sound thinker commonly poses questions to understand, slowing down and assessing all of the facts and factors involved, and then builds their argument or ideas. In classical logic, the law of non-contradiction, also known as the law of contradiction, or the principle of contradiction, states that contradictory statements cannot both be true in the same sense at the same time. Two propositions, A and B, and not A is not B, are meaning mutually exclusive. It is second of the three classical laws of thought. Lastly, let me make this clear. Sound thinkers do not value faith, which is basically strong belief without evidence or contrary to evidence. According to Ancient Origins Net, let's address your reptilian extraterrestrials like different rare blood. Most people who have the Rh blood type are Rh positive. There are also instances, however, where people are Rh negative. Some people call these reptilians, wrongly. Health problems may occur for the unborn child of a mother with Rh negative blood when the baby is Rh positive. This has led some to suggest that Rh negative blood must be of non-human origins. Yeah, nonsense. Theories range from the supernatural ones to such as being of divine descent or membership of a divinely chosen people group, to the scientific or pseudoscientific explanations such as inbreeding with extraterrestrials. The majority of scientists who have studied the blood type have concluded that it is most likely just a random mutation. This explanation seems to be the one most considered with available evidence and one that is most able to withstand Occam's razor. This unusual trait can, however, also be explained in terms of relatively mundane human genetics and natural selection. One possibility is that the gene of Rh negative blood has some sort of selective advantage that outweighed the negative consequences of having the negative blood, Rh negative blood. A well-known example of this phenomenon would be the case of sickle cell anemia and malaria. A large percentage of the population of West Africa where malaria is common consists of carriers of this gene for sickle cell anemia. Although they don't have the disease themselves, the reason is that just carrying the gene for sickle cell anemia gives a person carrying it immunity from malaria. Although sickle cell anemia is harmful, even deadly, carrying the gene gives a selective advantage and therefore is much more common than we would expect. The extraterrestrial explanation is even more problematic because the Rh negative gene is clearly a variation of the otherwise completely human gene. Unless it was specifically engineered by extraterrestrials from a pre-existing human gene, it is unlikely that it comes from anything other than humans. Homo sapiens. The other problem with the Rh negative blood type being a result of hybridization from extraterrestrials is that extraterrestrials are likely to have completely different biologies and genomes than human beings. Their genomes might not even be based on DNA, right? But something else such as RNA or something exotic, form of genetic storage that never evolved on Earth. This would make any variable hybrid very improbable, if not impossible. As the astronomer Carl Sagan would have put it, it would be easier to make a human tulip hybrid, than a human extraterrestrial hybrid. The unlikelihood and uncertainty of other options make the explanation that Rh negative blood type is a mutation that, because common in some population due to selective advantage, and is the most likely option. It is also the one that most easily survives Occam's razor. If this blood type was because of another human species, let alone extraterrestrials, many more uncertain assumptions that are difficult to verify have to be made. As a result, the evidence currently points toward little more than the ordinary mutation as a cause of the Rh negative phenotype. So you are wrong on all your odd claims, which I have shown again and again with facts. And I know how wrong as I study thousands of archaeological documents every few months and have thousands of archaeological friends on LinkedIn. I have 4,232 connections, many of which are archaeologists and anthropologists who post real archaeology facts and are unaware of all the time. And I have I have the Archaeology news link that gets all archaeology that relate in the world. So I know more than the pseudoscientific pseudo-historians you claim to believe, even if they have debunked claims, and yet you doubt me? When I back up all my claims with facts and sound reason, which you need to work on. And I present you with a picture of the Chinese pyramids. Yeah, there's pyramids in China. These Chinese pyramids refer to pyramidal-shaped structures in China, most of which are ancient mausoleums or burial mounds, built to house the remains of several early emperors of China and their imperial relatives. About 38 of them are located around within 16 miles, and 22 within 16 to 22 miles. The most famous is the mausoleum of the first Qin emperor, where the terracotta warriors were found that a lot of people know about. The earliest tombs in China were found in just north of Beijing, in Inner Mongolia Autonomous Region, and in Lithuania. They belong to the Neolithic Hongsang culture from 6,700 to 4,900. The site of New Shilang in Lihuan contains a pyramidal structure. Sorry, I can't read the names right. Here are some wild facts about the connections with the ancient Egyptians and ancient Chinese. The Haplogroup X in China, Egypt, North Africa, Cossacks, Central Asia, and Europe alludes to shared connections, similarities, and ideas or behaviors. Sound thinking to me, in a general way, is thinking, reasoning, or belief that tends to make foresight, a desire to be accurate as one can with valid and reliable reason and evidence. Dogmatic propaganda, as the ancient aliens is, versus disciplined rationality. Religionists, anti-theists, or faithists, like the ancient aliens, promote dogmatic propaganda, whereas atheists and anti-religionists, or rationalists, mostly promote disciplined rationality, or they should. Dogmatic propaganda commonly is a common motivator of flawed or irrational thinking, but with over 70 belief biases identified in people, this is hardly limited to just the religious or faith inclined. As the person who is this alien believer and other alien believers have told me who are atheists, I realize that atheists can believe such ridiculous nonsense also. Let me illustrate, though, what I'm saying. To me, all theists are believing lies or irrationality in that aspect of their lives relating to God belief. So the fact of any other common intellectual indexers where there might be right reason in a belief cannot be removed in relation to the flawed God belief corruption being committed. What I am saying is that this If you kill one person, you're a killer. If you believe in one God, I know you're a follower of dogmatic propaganda and cannot completely be a follower of disciplined rationality. However, I am not proclaiming all atheists are always rational, as irrationality is a revolving door many people believe or otherwise seem to stumble through. It's just that God belief does this with intentionality, just like the ancient alien belief. Disciplined rationality is motivated by principles of correct reasoning, with emphasis on valid and reliable methods or theories leading to a range of rational standpoints or conclusions, understanding that concepts and beliefs are often have consequences, thus hold an imperative for truth, or at least as close to truth as can be acquired, rejecting untruth. Disciplined rationality can be seen as an aid in understanding the fundamentals, foreknowledge, sound evidence, justified true belief that involves things like decision theory and concern with identifying the values, reasonableness, verification, certainties, uncertainties, and other relevant issues resulting in the most clear, optimal decision conclusion and or belief/disbelief. The disciplined rationality attempts to understand the justification or the lack of their justification in propositions and beliefs concerning itself, with variations, epistemic features of belief, truth, and or knowledge, which include ideas of justification, warrant, rationality, reliability, validity, and probability.
Alien believer response. Cool, but still, studying Nikola Tesla, and he is not a pseudoscientist. Interesting theory, also based on Tesla and the Wi-Fi energy. You have an open mind, you say? Have a look at Tesla. Love and peace, man. You should have been a lawyer. LOL.
My response. Nikola Tesla was a top-notch electrical engineer, but almost all of the fanciful inventions attributed to him by conspiracy theories are fictional. And I have a link of why conspiracy theories about Nikola Tesla can't be true, and almost all of the fanciful inventions attributed to Tesla by conspiracy theories are fake.
Alien believer response, including the car named after him?
My response, well, Tesla Motors, founded July 2003 by engineers Martin Eberhard and Mark Tarpenning, under the name Tesla Motors, is not the same as the person Tesla or the science. The company's name was derived from the physicist or scientist Nikola Tesla, but not in a direct relation to him. I believe one idea at a time, not a group, not all of a person, as if they, all individuals, must have sound justification, or they are not worthy to believe. So even if someone is right on 50 out of 100, that only means they have demonstrated the 50. It means nothing to the 50, the other 50. Everything is separate and must be approached as such. In short, and this is from Oatmeal, a website. In short, Nikola Tesla Motors was used by the name Tesla. Every single one of their automobiles was and still is powered by AC, induction motor, which was designed and presented by Nikola Tesla, patented by Nikola Tesla 126 years ago. The name Tesla in public domain and all of Tesla's patents have long since expired, so Tesla Motors is free to use his surname and his technology without owing any royalties or licensing to the Tesla family.
Alien believer response. I hope you don't discredit this brilliant man. Here is a video called Brilliant Nikola Tesla Inventions That Never Got Filled.
My response. I will not credit anything not proven. And as I do not hold sacred anything, and I don't blindly follow any idea or person, and as I hold open everything to challenge. So, yes, I will challenge anyone no matter their claimed intelligence. You need to learn critical thinking and logic, as many ways you're expressing your beliefs are built on fallacies, not sound thinking, as I have outlined for you. According to the foundation of critical thinking is the intellectually disciplined process of actively and skillfully conceptualizing, analyzing, applying, synthesizing, and or evaluating information gathered from or gathered by observation, experience, reflection, reasoning, or communication as a guide to belief and action. In explanatory form, it is based on universal intellectual values that transcend subject matter divisions, such as clarity, accuracy, precision, consistency, relevance, sound evidence, good reasons, depth, breadth, and fairness. It entails examinations of the structures and elements of thought implied in all reasoning, purpose, problem, or question at issue, assumptions, concepts, empirical grounding, reasoning leading to conclusions, implications and consequences, objections of alternative viewpoints, and frame of reference. Therefore, critical thinking, in being response to variable subject matter, issues, and purposes, is incorporated in a family of interwoven models of thinking. Along with them, scientific thinking, mathematical thinking, historical thinking, anthropological thinking, economic thinking, moral thinking, philosophic thinking. Critical thinking can be seen as having two components. One, a set of information and belief generating and processing skills. And two, the habit based on intellectual commitment of using those skills to guide behavior. It is thus to be contrasted with 1, the mere acquisition and relation of information alone, retention of information alone, because it involves a particular way in which information is sought and treated. 2, the mere possession of a set of skills, because it involves the continual use of them. And 3, the mere use of these skills as expertise, as an exercise, without acceptance of their results. Critical thinking varies according to the motivation underlying it. When grounded in selfish motives, it often manifests in skillful manipulation of ideas to serve one's own or one's group vested interests. As such, it's typically intellectually flawed. however pragmatically skillful it might be, or successful. When grounded in fair-mindedness and intellectual integrity, it is typically of a higher order intellectually, though subject to the challenge of idealism by those habituated to selfish uses. Critical thinking of any kind is never universal in its individual, in any individual. Everyone is subject to episodes of undisciplined or irrational thought. Its qualities are therefore typically a matter of degree and dependent upon, among other things, the quality and depth of experience given by a domain of thinking or with respect to a particular class of questions. No one is a critical thinker through and through, but only to such and such a degree, with such and such insights and blind spots, subject to such and such techniques towards self-delusion. For this reason, the development of critical thinking skills and disposition is a lifelong endeavor.
Alien believer number 2 response, who is commenting, trying to help the first alien believer. Damien, I ask you, could you explain how Machu Picchu was built? I looked it up myself, but just like the pyramids, some aspects like how they were large boulders moved and cut is still a mystery. The Incas used dry stone technique to build the city. No mortar was used. The stone bricks were simply put together without any material to stick them together. All rocks were used were split perfectly, and the bricks were put together like a huge puzzle. Some of the bricks are so tightly put together that one cannot even put a knife between them. The rocks were probably cut with the so-called wooden wedge technique. Holes were drilled into the rocks, and wet wooden wedges were inserted into them. After the constructors waited till the wet wooden wedges froze, the ice, having a bigger volume than water, forces the rock and creates fissures. But the wooden wedge technique cannot explain the smoothness and perfect straightness of the bricks. We do not know how the Incas made measurements and calculations. They did not write, but they managed to construct complex cities. It is also interesting to mention that the Incas did not know the wheel. I saw Baran's video on UFOs, and the dude also mentioned God. My UFO experience went like this. At 10:05 p.m. many years ago, I saw a bright star which I assumed was one of our planets. It was standing still. After a couple of minutes of viewing, it took off vertically at a decent speed. 1 week later, at the same time and place, I witnessed it again. I called MUFON, and the guy said we have anti-gravity spacecraft, but when I checked out their website, they denied it.
My response. Why was Machu Picchu built? By How Peru? And this is an excerpt from their blog. Aliens built Machu Picchu, ? Without wanting to cause any offense to aliens. This is coming from their blog for Peru. Who I am sure built very beautiful things on their own planets. It would appear they did not build Machu Picchu. Aliens are quite often given credit for mankind's greatest achievements, mainly because most people find aliens more interesting than real archaeology. However, unless you want to write a controversial book full of nonsense that might sell quite well, it is probably a good idea to forget about Martians, little green men, and other forms of extraterrestrial life when contemplating the question, why was Machu Picchu built? I
think so, alien person response. I think this topic is just like religion. Those who believe need no proof, and those who don't won't be convinced. So I call truce, my friend.
And I post a thing to ultimate checklist for critical thinking. These are things you need to do. Who, what, where, when, why, how. The hammer of truth. Hammer of truth, i.e. ontology, epistemology, and axiology. 3 philosophies that I use methodologically. Both builds and destroys. It aids in building accuracy towards truth and destroys bad claims that are untrue. Just remember a simple rule. All beliefs need something to support them, or they are at best unsupported, unaccepted, or unsupported accepted assertions, arguments, or ideas. At worst, completely baseless, misinterpreted confusions, or outright falsehoods. See, it's like this. If one feels something requires faith, an unsupported cognition of acceptance, to see a thing as real without realizing it, one has affirmed that such a thing is not likely a true part of reality. Again, I value good belief etiquette, which is reasoned belief acquisitions, good belief maintenance, and honest belief relinquishment. I am first always a rationalist. Reason is my only master. And that's it.